of the things that I find very unique about your comments is that there is this concerted anti-Israel campaign coming from both within the Palestinian Authority and by many different disparate elements that have formed this sort of unholy, Zach Schaefer tells the intersectional alliance, Zach, that he deals with through the Israel Action Network. So there's this grouping of this umbrella that's attacking Israel from all sides and its legitimacy. What are ways in which the non-Israeli, the diaspora organizations can work together to push for an Israeli victory, or to push for an end to Palestinian rejectionism? I'd like to start with Mr. Pipes, and then we'll go to Mr. Yemini.
I think the key is to go on the offense. If all you know is Israel, you're always defending. You need to know about the Palestinians, about Syria, about Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Islamism, Iran, Turkey. It's a big Middle East, and a lot of topics. But if you want to be effective, particularly in the college, in the university arena, you have to know these different topics, and then you can go on the offense. If all you know is Israel, you're always on the defense.
And Mr. Yemini, what do you think are the ways that diaspora organizations, whether they be Jewish or not, can support?
Yes, I will answer. Yesterday evening I was in Stanford University, and the evening before I was in Berkeley University. And I go from campus to campus in order to understand the atmosphere, in order to give lectures to students. And one of the main obstacles concerning your question is that what I find is that pro-Israelis, I'm not speaking about the anti-Israelis, they are not willing to listen. But the pro-Israelis, students from Hillel, students from Stand With Us, students from the big projects and others, and all the organizations, they don't know anything. When they are manipulated with the Tikkun Olam, when they are manipulated with human rights, when they are manipulated with the so many crimes that Israel is committing, which is a big lie, they are becoming anti-Israelis. So it's not only the Palestinians, as we spoke about. It's much worse, because many of our youngsters are becoming part, JDP and others. They are becoming part of it, not because they are anti-Semites, not because they are anti-Israelis. They are becoming part of this phenomenon because, as Francis Bacon said before, it's knowledge is power. Right now, ignorance is power. When they don't know, they are becoming so anti-Israelis. When they are manipulated, they believe their professors. And this is the outcome. We have to fight it. I have to admit that my very small contribution to this struggle is by this book. But the struggle is not going to be easy.
So I want to kind of dig down on that a little bit. You say the human rights, the legitimacy, the issues dealing with the Palestinians are all things that we don't necessarily, can you hear me, Richard? No? The human rights. The way in which we had this point that was made by Mr. Yemini about being liberal causes are on the Jewish side being used to undermine the Zionist side, because there's individuals who may identify with liberal Jewish movements or liberal Zionist movements or even anti-Zionist movements like the Jewish Voices for Peace. They're using these issues to attack the pro-Israel community from within. But there's sort of a little bit of tension here, because campaigns that the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, the Ministry of Public Diplomacy have used since the advent of the BDS movement have talked about how wonderful Israel is for human rights, how it is the center of LGBT activity and protections in the Middle East. So you have one group attacking you for your alleged use of it, and even then when you try to say, no, we're defending ourselves, you're accused of pinkwashing or other things. So what kind of messaging should the Israeli government be using in the wake of either going on the offensive or trying to address these issues, these liberal attacks against Israel from within? What should the government, what should the organizations that represent Israeli interests be saying?
I was very influenced by an article by Yoram Hazony some 10 years ago, in which he argued that these efforts to show Israel as a good place for gays and women and the like are futile, because the fundamental critique of Israel doesn't pertain to these specifics, but rather to the more fundamental notion that Israel is a country, a Western country, that uses the sword, that engages in military action. And memorable in this regard was November 2003 Eurobarometer poll, which asked many Europeans, thousands of Europeans, what's the most dangerous country on earth? Israel came in first, followed by North Korea, Iran, and then the United States. So this points to something profound. That, yeah, those non-Westerners, they do what they want. They're not held to the same standards. But for Westerners to resort to force, as Israel and the United States do, is completely unacceptable. It breaks the rules of civilization. And I think that's the profound level at which Israel is being criticized. And that's the profound level at which the advocates for Israel must respond. But how to do so, I actually asked Hazony, okay, good analysis, what next? He didn't have much of an answer. I don't have much of an answer, but I think that's the level at which we must operate.
Mr. Yemini?
I have to admit that I'm not dealing with PR, I'm not dealing with Diaspora, because I'm not an expert in that field. It's very important, it's highly important, but I'm not sure that I have a good answer. But instead of an answer, I will give you a story, a short one, don't worry. It was 3-4 years ago, I gave a lecture in BU, Boston University. But down in the building, there was a demonstration of students from JPP. And they had this kind of placards, Israel, genocide, genocide, Israel, okay. And I began to speak with 2 students, only 2. There were not so many, there were 6, 7. I spoke with 2 of them. And I asked them, how many Palestinians Israel killed during the whole conflict? And they didn't know, but they thought that they had genocide. Okay. But so how many? What is a genocide? They didn't know, and they told me something like between 600,000 to 6 million. I have no idea why. Sorry to say, but they didn't understand that I'm the speaker. So it was a very nice conversation, and because of my color, they were sure that I'm a Palestinian or an Arab or something. So after something like 5-6 minutes of conversation, I told them, I want to tell you something. I'm the speaker. Please come up and listen. Just listen. They did. And I'm showing in my lectures numbers, proportions, whatever you want. Because I conducted so many comparative studies in order to understand, in order to refute. And they were listening. After the lecture, they told me, we cannot say if you manipulated us or not, we don't know, maybe it's all lies, whatever you said, maybe not. What we ask you is that because we are not so familiar with all the subject and all the numbers, all the graphs, what we ask you to do is to come to speak in the JPP chapter, in BU. I told them, fair enough. In that year I was in Boston, in Harvard, so it was good enough for me. And then 10 days after, they called me to tell me that the JPP chapter is not willing to accept me as a speaker. Good news, the 2 of them left the JPP.
Gregg. So, Daniel has some.
As an addendum, I published an article with Gunnar Heinzen of Germany almost exactly 10 years ago, in which we looked at fatalities since World War II. And we noted that the Arab-Israeli conflict in its entirety had 51,000 fatalities on both sides in all those years. and it ranked number 49th in terms of fatalities in wars since World War II. So 51,000 is not a small number in absolute terms, but in relative terms, it's tiny compared to the major conflicts, which number one is 40 million in China, number two is 10 million in the Soviet bloc, number three is 4 million in Ethiopia, and so forth. So 51,000.
So maybe now that we're looking at a comparative analysis between other conflicts and what's going on between the Israelis and Palestinians, the Middle East that we now know today is very different from the one that was at the outset of the rejection of Arafat at Camp David II. We've had tens of uprisings in different contexts and countries and cities, from Morocco all the way to Iran. We've had dictators replaced by political Islam replaced by military autocrats in some cases. How do you think the Palestinians, or the way in which Israel relates to the Palestinians vis-a-vis Israel's neighbors and the specifically Sunni Arab countries in the region, can help contribute to overcoming the challenge of Palestinian rejectionism?
Well, Israel is worse off than ever on the campuses in the United States and other countries, but it's much better off in the Middle East itself. Campuses are important, but the Middle East is more important. And right now, there is the building on the Ben-Dror example that Mr. Yemini mentioned 17 years ago, that the Saudis, the Jordanians, the Emiratis, the Egyptians, and others are open to Israel in a way that hasn't been the case before. Now, it is tactical, because they're more concerned about Iran. But tactical can lead to something larger if it's properly exploited. And so Israel has opportunities now that it never had before.
Mr. Yemini?
Unfortunately, I'm not optimistic, not because of the Arab world. I'm not optimistic because of two things. Palestinians, leadership, one, and the new phenomena. We have here in the United States, and not only in the United States, the Palestinian elites, political elites, intellectual elites. They became the mega celebrities of the whole phenomena of intersectionality. They are not going to give up this kind of very prestigious status. They are not going to give up. The day that those progressive elites will understand that whatever they are doing is counterproductive to peace, that actually what they do is to perpetuate the Palestinian suffering, maybe there will be a change. But as long as the Rockefeller Foundation and the Ford Foundation and the George Soros found many foundations, as long as they give them so much money, they will never give up on this rejectionism because they benefit from it. When you benefit from it, they don't mind about the suffering of, and there are many Palestinians that are suffering. They don't care about them as long as they benefit, and they do.
Thank you. I'd like to open up the panel to a few questions from the floor.